All right, so let me just introduce us before we get started. So my name is Lauren Lobdell. I'm the Vice President of Client Services at Tutor.com and the Princeton Review. Today's session is really kind of the culmination of conversations we've been having with our customers over the past several weeks. There's been a lot of anxiety as campuses are trying to figure out what to do, how to move their classes online, how to get their instructors, so all of you who are on this session today online, how to support their students and bring their tutors online. So while some campuses have been doing, online everything for a long time, we know a lot of other campuses are just kind of moving there or have some tools in place, but maybe weren't ready to do it overnight. So we put this session together today because at Tutor.com, we live and breathe online every day, engaging students in a virtual classroom. Now, instruction is different than tutoring. And so I'm going to pass off to my colleague here, Dr. Amy Dietzman, who is our Learning and Design Manager on our instructional team, because she has a lot of experience before she even came to Tutor.com, working in this space, being really focused on instructional design, online education, and curriculum. So I'm going to pass it to Amy to take it away, but I will be moderating questions throughout the session and helping to do the Q&A at the end of the session. So please feel free to send those as we go here.
Great. All right, so let me just introduce myself a little bit and let you guys know sort of who I am and where I came from. I've kind of worked in both the K-12 space and the higher ed space, and I love both, which is why I love working for Tutor.com, because I work in both spaces. So I started off as a high school English teacher, and I used to live in Phoenix, Arizona, so a lot of my background comes from that area. And then I moved into curriculum, instruction, and assessment. I worked for a really large school district in Arizona. And then I moved into higher ed, and I started doing curriculum and instructional design for Grand Canyon University. One of the things I learned a lot there, but a couple of the things I learned was how to build an online course and also how to build an in-person course, because they have a traditional campus as well. So a lot of their courses are built in both spaces. So I learned sort of how to build in both spaces, how to build an online course that a person is actually teaching in person. So that's what I did for Grand Canyon, which was great. And at that point, I also started as a lead adjunct instructor for Arizona State University, which I still do. So I'll use a lot of examples from that because I teach online. I teach an educational psychology course. I actually teach several ed psychology courses there. And then I became a director of professional development for Need These, which is an ed tech company. So you're going to think I must be a really technical person, but I'm not. And I can tell you that I had technology experts who worked for me, but my real expertise is talking to instructors and teachers and trying to put myself in the place that you're in. And that's really where I think about the learner. So I think when I'm designing a course, I'm thinking about the students. How are the students learning? But I'm also thinking about the instructor. How does the instructor feel in this situation? So that's really where my expertise is. So as the director of professional development, I really just went into the schools and trained the teachers in how to integrate technology in their classroom without knowing a whole lot about the technology side. And then I became an instructional designer with Sumo Learning, which is in Asheville, North Carolina, which is where I live now. And then I became the learning and design manager at Tutor.com. And if you're a Tutor.com client, then what that means is I'm still an instructional designer. The way I look at it is I help prepare our tutors, and I help them by providing resources, putting myself in their place and trying to figure out what do they need in order to be good at their jobs. And I look at a lot of content. So when schools become clients of ours and they have content and they say, hey, can your tutors help tutor my students in this whatever class, engineering, I look at that content and help decide whether or not we have the expertise to do that. So the objectives for this training are that I really want to help you develop strategies for transitioning your class to the online platform. I also want to help create engaging online activities, and I know engaging is important, but I want to also say this: go easy on yourself. At this point, everybody's a little rushed, everybody's a little anxious, and give yourself a break. You do not have to have the most perfect online course at this point. Every lesson doesn't have to be perfect. Just don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to try something. Be honest with your students and say, hey, we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we won't do it again next week. Let me know what you think, and just be ready to actually share in their frustration and anxiety also. And I'll share my own anxiety with you. I have done a gazillion trainings in my lifetime, and I have never done a webinar. So I'm so nervous today because I can't see you, and I don't know if you're shaking your head yes, or if you laugh when I make a joke, I can't see that. So for me, this is scary. And so I'm in this with you. I understand how you feel. We're all in this together. And so here's a little sense of humor. This was recently posted. I'll let you read it for a second and just think about this poor guy. So this professor was obviously trying something new. He wasn't recording the lecture. He had his computer muted. They couldn't hear. He didn't have his phone available. Just everything kind of went wrong. And he probably felt terrible afterwards, but hopefully he was able to laugh about it. Sounds like the students were laughing about it. And hopefully this isn't one of you. Hopefully this is somebody that's not in this webinar, but it happens and it's okay. And I'm sure that some technology will go wrong at some point in this and we'll all understand. So let's just look real quick at this is what it looks like when I asked you this question at the beginning. This is what I get to see. And so I'm just looking to see if I can grab some questions. I did see a few people saying, you know, how do I keep my students engaged? How do I help my students feel connected? I see those words a couple of places. So I'm going to really try. I'm old school. I want a manual. That's great. I'm really going to try to help ease your mind here. So let's jump into that, and we're going to talk exactly about being connected and being engaging. So sometimes when we move a course to online, we get a little bit caught up in the content and making it engaging, or we want to make sure we give the students enough work, and we forget to remember how we originally designed our lesson, how we originally designed maybe the unit. So keep reminding yourself what you want students to know in the end. What's the purpose of your lesson? What do you want your students to get out of every little assignment? Will this get them closer to that objective or that assessment? Kind of ask yourself that question a lot so you don't get too caught up in, ooh, I got to think of something fun. And remember that you're actually still trying to get to the same goal you were before, you're just using a different medium. Then figure out how you can do things you haven't tried before. So remember to start with the backward design. If you've ever learned about backward design, remember that backward design strategy and ensure that everything's still aligned and meaningful. So keep in mind that as much as you may not have planned to teach your course online, your students also didn't sign up for this. So some of your students are going to think, oh, yay, this is going to be easy. Online class, awesome. And some are going to be more anxious. The older students that you have, if you have adult learners, they're going to be more anxious thinking, I don't know, I'm not really self-directed, or I need to work on a schedule. I don't have a schedule. So be aware that they are not really in the place at this moment, maybe that they would like to be for this course. So some students thrive in the online environment and many more do not. And actually it would surprise you how many do and how many don't. It's never quite what I think. I can tell you that I have a son who is the most scatterbrained person ever. He's in college and he's very forgetful and he's not really good with schedules. He does really well online because he's pretty technical, so he enjoys that. I have another son who is in high school and he is a mini me. We're very, very organized, and yet to be seen how he's going to do. He's obviously having to switch to online as well. I don't know. I heard him talking a lot and doing video games today, so I'm kind of not sure how he's going to do. So it isn't the best mode for everybody. Be prepared for students who suddenly have this total freedom to struggle with accountability and time management. They will now be distracted by a lot of things: TV, video games, the news, their kids, their spouse. There could have a lot of people in a small space. So from my experience, the hardest thing about an online learner is that they are undisciplined And this leads to procrastination. So let me tell you a story. I teach for Arizona State University, and let's just say I have 30 students in my course, right? And their assignment is due Sunday night at 11:59. Well, I always check in throughout the week to see, hopefully some of them will do their assignment early so that I can grade it early, and I'll check in, and literally 2 students will log in during the week and do that assignment. And then Saturday will roll around and 2 or 3 more will do it. And the rest of them will log in between 11:30 and 12:02 and complete that assignment. That is just how they are. And I know you experience that where you are as well, and you always are going to have those students who procrastinate, and then Monday morning you get the emails, oh my gosh, I didn't do it. But I want to say that in this time now, that what we're living in, this sort of, I don't know, apocalypse or whatever, be prepared to maybe extend a little grace to your students, be kind. They may have internet troubles. Like, I get those excuses all the time, and I'm like, yeah, right. But maybe they really do have internet troubles, and maybe they do have stresses and they can't pay their bills. And there's a lot of things that are going on with our students. So you may need to kind of work with them in a different way than you have in the past. But be prepared, they will procrastinate no matter what. Just because you're moving to online doesn't mean you don't interact with your students face-to-face. So we are going to talk today about trying some synchronous tools. So I'm going to show you those in a little bit. Another tip for dealing with those distracted and isolated students, being a student online is isolating anyways, and then add into the whole thing that, you know, they're doing all this social distancing. They're going to feel really isolated. So be overly communicative. And what that means is explain everything way more than you think you should, and email your students more than you think you should. My best advice, though, is keep your emails short. So if you send an email to your students that's 6 paragraphs long, know that they are not going to read it. Adults, kids, it doesn't matter. They're not going to read 6 paragraphs. So use bullets and keep your emails short, and then just do more of them. Engage with your students more than once a week. And what that means is don't have everything due on the same day, and also consider checking in on them more often, and that's where that synchronous part comes in. Make your expectations very clear. Write out, like I said, very detailed directions. That kind of goes with the being overly communicative. Way more directions than you think you need, bulleting out every little thing they're supposed to do. Group projects are also a must in this time, in my opinion. Sometimes they can be a real headache, but right now I think they're really important because it helps your students connect to each other. Weekly check-ins are a great idea. I'm going to show you ways we can do that. Another suggestion is check for understanding. Since you don't have the benefit, just like I don't have the benefit right now of looking at you, you won't have the benefit always of seeing your students in your classroom. You're not seeing them shake their head or fall asleep or show you that they don't get it. So try lots of tools to make sure your students are getting it, and you know that they don't need more information from you. You don't want to see a really great student suffer in this environment. So really reach out a lot. On-campus teachers don't always have a lot of grades in their grade book, and that's where online courses are different. Online courses generally have more grades. As much as we wish our students were intrinsically motivated, and some are, but we have to face the fact that if there's no grade attached to something, many students are going to see that as optional. So consider that when you plan your class. I mean, maybe you want some things to be optional, but if you want your students to do something, most of the time, most students need to know that they're going to get a grade for it. Also remember to assess what you intend to assess. So what you say you're going to assess. Make sure you don't accidentally have what we call a hidden curriculum. And what that means is that you provide your students with some kind of directions, and maybe they're limited, and then you use this more detailed rubric to grade that assignment. And so you're providing these directions and your rubric, they don't match up. And yes, you may say, students, check the rubric, but a lot of times they don't. And so it's really best to make sure that those two things are completely aligned. And then tell your students, here are your directions, don't forget to check the rubric. Then you're just covering your bases and your students feel like it's fair. Also, I do understand that some schools are moving to a pass-fail system right now. So I don't know if that's your school, and if it is, then follow that and don't listen to what I just said about extra grades. But if you're at a school that's still doing grades, you might just have to reconsider how you set up your grade book. And this grade book, by the way, is from Canvas, just showing what it looks like. Keep in mind that if your class runs for an hour and a half, 3 times a week, your online class doesn't necessarily have to equal that exact 5 hours. So you can use that as a guide, but also remember that your online class includes content and activities. So typically your institution will probably provide you with some kind of rule of thumb or guideline here, but maybe they just haven't had time to do that. And if so, here's just sort of like, this is kind of what the experts say it should be, but there's really no hard and fast rule. The hard thing is you don't know how long it's going to take sometimes for a student to read something and then write something. Sometimes that varies, so it's really hard to know. I know 9 to 18 hours is a big difference. But if you substitute a couple of articles and a 5-minute video for a normal lecture that you would give in 45 minutes, that's okay. Just know that that's okay. Hopefully you have access to an LMS, learning management system. If you don't, there are lots of free ones, especially right now. A lot of the things I'm going to show you are free right now because of the where we are in the world. But there's Moodle, Edmodo, Google Classroom. Those are generally free. Sometimes they're not free when you get to a certain number of students. Canvas is free up to a certain amount of students, and I actually haven't checked it today. It's possible that they extended that. So building an online course in an LMS is really easy. You may not have even noticed all the tools that are available to you because you haven't had to use them. So just take it 1 week at a time. Start with 1 week's worth of work and just start building. So all the tools you need are there. Here's a course that I built in Canvas, and it just showed, this is really basic. This is just a super basic course, but at least it'll help you with an outline. And a module in most LMSs is a week. So this is a week's worth of work I'm showing you. So the content is a mix of articles and videos. So right here where I say start here, actually sometimes you have to tell your students to start here so they know they have to read first. So I always have a mix of articles and videos. I look for TED Talks, I look for YouTube videos to supplement the readings that I give my students. Some of my classes have lectures and some don't. I have a quiz in here, which is like a self-assessment, and that fits this type of course that I'm showing you because this is a college and career readiness course that I built for a military program. So there's you know, a quick self-assessment there. Then I have some discussion questions, which I directly tie back to the reading and the videos. So there's always something there that they have to have read in order to be able to answer. Lastly, I have a summative assessment, which in this one I ask students to write SMART goals because that's what we're talking about, setting goals. Whatever that might be, the summative assessment is to bring together all the stuff that they've learned in that module. If you haven't already been using an LMS for your assessments, you should also know that you can add rubrics to all your assignments. Rubrics are usually already there and they're pretty easy to build, but you know, don't make too much work for yourself. Like I told you, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do the best you can for now. This again is just a very basic week. We've got content, we've got peer-to-peer collaboration, that's the discussion questions. We've got peer-to-instructor collaboration because the instructors obviously can jump in and be part of the discussion board as well. We've got an assignment or activity, and I've got a summative assessment. Lastly, the traditional option, which I just had in my Canvas course, I just wanted to show is a discussion forum. There's a lot of research about discussion forums. Some say that it's not really the best, most effective way to get your students engaged. Sometimes it is the best. It just depends on what you have available to you. But this is what a discussion forum looks like. It's available in most LMSs. You don't have to create this or come up with it. It's just an option that you have. You would just add the questions, figure out the points, whatever. Be very, very clear in how you want your students to interact here. This is really important. Make sure that your students know your expectations in terms of what's the word count? How do you want them to format? Do you want them to cite sources? Do you want them to respond to peers? How many peers? Otherwise, you'll inevitably get, I guarantee this, you'll get the, yeah, I agree. and that'll be basically what they post to each other. Or you'll get the texting language. I still get this all the time. Lowercase letters, all one big paragraph. Make sure that you let them know they need to type in academic language if that's what you want. It's also a good idea to have students post their initial response one day, and then a few days later, have them post their responses to their peers, or have that be due. That way they aren't all trying, like I said before, at 11:50 to hurry up and respond to each other, and then there's not enough people that have already responded. It gets a little messy. So just make that very clear. And just in case you don't have access to an LMS, another option is to build your own web page or your own website. Again, super easy. Many sites are free, and the best part is that they provide templates, so you don't have to try and design something from scratch, unless that's something that you do. Just find a template, you add your content, add some links. Students can submit their assignments to you through email for a low-tech option. If this is what you have to work with, it's what you have to work with. Or if you're just overwhelmed by the idea of using the LMS, if it's too much and you just want to start simple, this is maybe less intimidating, but it's just an option. I just want to throw that out there. So let's talk about what you can actually put into your class. To replace the direct instruction that you may be doing already, that you've been doing, you should be wary of substituting just reading a textbook. It seems like an obvious substitution, but it isn't always the best way for students to learn and retain. Small snippets from a textbook are okay, but make sure you supplement those with more engaging content. If your students are millennials or younger, they expect to be entertained. They want videos. They want things to be snappy and quick. And unfortunately, sometimes we try to make the students fit into our mold of what we think they should do. But in this situation, you may not be able to do that. So it's really best to try to find engaging ways to get them. And saying read 4 chapters in a textbook may not be the best way. So also think in terms of asynchronous and synchronous options. And we're going to take a look at some synchronous options first. We're looking at asynchronous first. How can you transition a lecture into an online lecture? These are the simplest ways. You can use a recorded video. You can try making a screencast, or you can use a video and screencast. So let me show you some free tools. For simple videos, you can just use your phone or your webcam, right? That's the easiest. It's okay. Or rather than reinventing the wheel, you can try looking on YouTube, check out Khan Academy, find content that's already created, possibly even with more high-tech options than you have available to you, and use those. If you've never made a screencast video before, it is really easy, and there are lots of tools offered to educators for free. I really like Screencast-O-Matic and Jing. I had no training on either one. I just downloaded them and watched the quick tutorials, and then I opened up my PowerPoint and I gave it a try. You can use what you already have and you just turn it into a video that students can watch in their own time. Just keep in mind that if you have a slideshow that takes you around, like, let's just say 45 minutes to narrate and record, it's probably too long. Cut it up or try to make it shorter, or find articles and other videos to supplement. So make a small lecture, a few articles, a Khan Academy video, or a TED Talk or something like that. Put that all together, and now you've got a really pretty engaging lesson, because students are looking at different things. They're clicking, they're reading over here, they're looking at this, different pictures. Keep in mind that if your students are watching a really long video, they're going to start multitasking, just like you would, right? They're going to start multitasking, and then at that point, they're not learning and engaging probably the way you wish they would. I also want to point out that we aren't endorsing any of these particular products here. I'm just sharing with you some of the things I've tried, things I've learned, tried in my own classroom. Your school may have tools available to you that are free or that are their preferred tools, so make sure you check that there isn't something you're supposed to be using. Like, I don't know, you might try a free LMS and your school might have something else that they'd rather you use. So just want to throw that out there. One of the best options is using Loom for a recorded lecture. I like Loom a lot. It's a way you can record your lecture and a slideshow at once. And this way you kind of add your personal touch because your students can actually see your face instead of just hearing your voice. And the students can add emojis as they watch it, which you can see in this picture. They're adding little thumbs up and hearts. I mean, I guess they could put thumbs down and then that would be hurtful to you. So be prepared for that. But they can interact with it a little bit as they're watching it. This is another one that I just downloaded the app. You can download it a couple different ways. I downloaded the app and then I just played around with it and I literally had a video screencast within 10 minutes. It was not hard at all. And this is also a really cool tool that you can flip to your students and let them do it. Let them do a presentation for you. Once they see how you do it, it's kind of fun. Now we're going to look at the synchronous options for your lectures. So we're still talking about lectures, direct instruction. So synchronous means that it's happening in real time. And this is a really good way. Someone said, you know, how do I connect to my students? This is a really good way to connect to them. So you can use a time in front of your students like this, where you're using a video conferencing to provide direct instruction, or better yet, this is even a better option, flip your classroom. If you haven't already heard about flipping your classroom, it's all the rage. It was all the rage a few years ago, so you probably heard about it. But what it is where you assign readings, videos, you assign the content to your students first. They do that. And then when they come to meet with you, they've already done it. So now your time is spent having meaningful discussions back and forth. So this is what I would highly recommend you try. For larger classes, though, it's a really good idea to break it up. I mean, this is only showing the teacher if she's the one in the red, and then she's only talking to 4 students. Obviously, you can do a lot more than that. Most video conferencing software lets you still talk to a lot of students, but the more students you have, as you know, the better chance you're going to have some that just sort of disappear and don't talk. So the best idea is to try to break it up into small groups. If your school offers Tutor.com, another option is our Meeting Spaces platform. So it's a new product that we provide through Tutor.com. It's free for all of our clients right now. We decided to roll it out really quickly because of what's going on in the world. And if you're not sure if your school is a Tutor.com client, you can use the email address on the screen. This is another option for what I just was talking about, video conferencing, that you can use to interact with your students. You can teach a lesson, have discussions, share your screen with your students, demonstrate using our whiteboard. You can use it to open up virtual office hours. You can also try group office hours where you set a specific time and you just say, anybody who wants to go over the lesson this week, come on in. And everyone joins that wants to, and you can go over things that maybe are confusing for students, areas where they might be struggling. It's up to you how you use this. There's a lot of ways to use video conferencing to really connect to your students. Another option is to let your students teach one another. So it's okay to step back from the lectern and let students teach, and especially in this environment where you're feeling stressed. What I mean here is that you provide students with some kind of content, and then you let them submit presentations or lectures to you, and then you choose the best ones and you let all the students watch them. So it's some variation of that. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. Long ago, we used to hear, be the facilitator in your classroom, or make your students do the work. You know, at Tutor.com, when we're training our tutors, we always say, the one who does the work is the one who does the learning. So this is just sort of a variation of that. It seems a little scary because you may be letting go a little bit of control, but if you're uncomfortable with some of these lecture options, then this is a way you can kind of ease yourself into it. Let the students try it, see what's working. And it's also hard because, you know, as college professors, you're the expert. They aren't. But it's okay to let your students become the experts, and you'll probably be surprised at how well your students will handle this and how creative they'll be. So it's just something you can try. Again, one of those things you could try once and say, hey, we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we won't do it again, and then tell your students later, didn't love it, or hey, that was awesome, do you guys want to do that again? Just some options for you. There are other ways to get students engaged, and that's through discussions and collaborative activities. Peer-to-peer collaboration is more important now than ever because, like we've talked about, your students are isolated. So get your students work, unless I guess they're in Florida on the beaches, because that's a big deal right now in the news. Those students aren't feeling isolated at all. But if your students are like my kids, they're feeling a little isolated. So get your students working together so that they don't feel like that. Also, like I just touched on, consider face-to-face with your students using virtual office hours or activities between you and individual students. You can do that as well. I don't know how many students you have, that may never work, but I'll show you a little bit about what I mean. So all of these options are really great ways to connect and check in with your students. You can create a group chat in these mediums that you're a part of, or just set a time every day where everyone checks in and you communicate, hey, checking in, what do you guys need? What's going on? And then your students can say, oh, this video link didn't work or whatever, just an opportunity to talk. So all of these are free. Even Microsoft Teams is free right now. So, and again, Meeting Spaces is free if you're a Tutor.com client, but even Snapchat. You could even set up group chats in Snapchat. So these are just options where, I don't know, you can be kind of cool maybe. Padlet is one of my favorite tools for collaboration, and that's what we used at the start of this webinar today. And we used it in the most simple form. When I first started using Padlet, the only option was the wall. So you could just basically start with a plain wall and people would add their little bricks to it. But now there's all kinds of templates, and you can be super creative in how you use this. And so what you do is basically you ask some sort of question and then you send the link to your students and they start adding to it. You can do this in real time. You can do it as an assignment. Mess around with the settings and set it up the way that it works best for you. I will say you could have your students make sure that their names are associated with their accounts, or you can leave it anonymous. But if you leave it anonymous, you know that's dangerous. So just some thoughts about that. But you can see all these different cool ways to set it up. It's so easy. It takes 2 seconds to set up a Padlet and then just shoot the link out to your students and get them talking. So here's a really simple example that I did once. I used this as a front-loading activity for a leadership professional development that I did several years ago. I asked the group, what strengths do you bring to the workplace? And then they added all these tiles to the Padlet, and that was it. And then it just led to a conversation. So it was just sort of to get things going. Another example is I used a Padlet for a guaranteed and viable curriculum mapping training that I did for a school district. So I started the Padlet with their grade levels, and then they were on different teams, and each team had to add their important components. They each added the list onto their little cards themselves. So then this also led to a really great discussion. So you can have it be a group assignment as well, which is fun. Flipgrid is another one of my favorite new cool tools that I just learned about actually when I was planning this training. So I haven't tried it in my classroom yet, but it's great for discussion and collaboration. You pose a question and your students can respond to your question with videos. They can download the app and then you send out the code, provide a time limit, and they just do it with their phone and they record a video. I have, like I told you before, 2 sons, one in high school, one in college, so they were the perfect target population. So we did play around with it, and I can tell you what we came up with. But this is a super cool way. It fits in with students nowadays. Unless you're teaching adult learners, I don't know if they would love this. But if you're working with students who are, you know, millennial age, I think they would think this is pretty cool. So here's what it looks like. So we start with this is what the teacher view is. So where this little penguin is, here's the question I asked. And then when they post their video, they have to take a screenshot, they post their video. And then when I click on it, I see their little video. See, my son took a picture, did a video of the dog. And then I can provide written feedback. I can provide a rubric. They have a rubric already there. It only has ideas and performance on there, so you can give them a little score. I can record a video in response to them if I want to, and they can also record videos to each other. So as soon as one person posts a video, then they can see each other's and they can go back and forth. And you can turn that part off too. There's different settings you can mess around with, but this could work for a lot of different subjects. I think it's really good for a humanities subject. Obviously, if you ask any question that, you know, students can provide some verbal response would be really cool. But I think you could also do it for things like math, where you can have a student demonstrate something for you, complete a problem, and then you could respond in a video with, well, you missed this step right here. This is how it's really done, or something like that. Just some ideas. I think we could probably throw around a lot of ways to use this, but I would say this is another one of those that you should just try and see what the students think of it. And if they don't like it or it's not engaging, then you don't try it again. So I'm not talking a lot about assessment today because I figure you probably already have your assessments done. You probably already have final exams done. But I just want to point out that, you know, for activities, again, group projects are probably really important. You could probably pretty easily take an assignment that you already had and turn it into a group assignment. Encourage all types of communication between your students, and you don't have to tell them to communicate through Skype. They will find their own ways to communicate. So it's really good to kind of open up those doors of communication so that they're not, again, isolated, just looking at a computer screen all day, but communicating with each other, hopefully, you know, making friendships that they really probably weren't making in class. Also, check out your LMS, and if you have one, and use the assessment tools that are available in there. Think beyond just writing and multiple choice. So I was an English teacher, so when I would give an assessment, it was either a writing assignment or it was a multiple choice test with some essay questions, right? And so now for your assessments, you might want to try to think more along the lines of presentations and things like that, just to get students talking and interacting and just to add a little more excitement to the day. I would really recommend trying that. Not necessary, but it's something you could try. So most importantly, let students be creative and try new things. Putting younger students in a box doesn't really allow them to find new ways to try and do things. So for example, I recently gave an assignment to my class where the students had to submit a narrated presentation. I was very specific about what they needed to include in their presentation, but I didn't tell them what they needed to use to make the presentation. I just said it needed to be narrated and I needed to be able to open it. And I was amazed how many students didn't use PowerPoint and how many students really provided these like just great quality assignments that I'd never seen before. Using different tools I'd never seen before. Some used Loom, some used Zoom. There was all different things that they tried. And I ended up getting some of the best assignments I've ever gotten. This was beyond what I was thinking. My mind was do a PowerPoint, that's a presentation, and they didn't go there. So sometimes you just want to leave it open to your students to try something and you'll be surprised and you'll figure it out. You know, if you can't open it or they send the wrong kind of format, tell them you can't open it and then they'll figure it out. So a checklist. So I didn't want to be overwhelming today. I didn't want to give you too many tools and overwhelm you, but I also wanted to give those who were ready to go for it and try some new things, some options, and those who just wanted to say, hey, I just want to engage my students a little bit. I want to try just a little bit. Then here's where you could get started. For the first thing is break up your traditional lecture. So if you are still the type of person that lectures, I don't know if all of you are, but if you're a lecturer, break it up. Remember that you don't want to give your students a 45-minute or an hour video to watch. Expand your directions. So all the directions you've given on assignments in the past, if you had the ability to explain it to your students in class, maybe your directions weren't as detailed as they need to be now. Connect with your students synchronously to help them feel connected to you, help them see you, especially if you have younger students. They may need to know that there's some normalcy. You're okay, and so they can see you and they feel like, okay, something in my life is still normal. I did ask my two sons, what are you the most anxious about right now in the world? And surprisingly, one of them said the stock market, and the other one said, I'm not worried about anything. I love being online. And then my husband piped in and said, well, I'm a little bit worried that like one of us might get sick. And then they were like, oh yeah, I guess I'm a little worried that one of you might get sick. So I mean, But I think my kids might be abnormal. I think that maybe some students are feeling a little more anxious than others, especially if they had to, figure out how to fly home in the middle of all this and everything. So connect with your students and be calm and kind of be reassuring. Explore a collaborative tool to get your students to talk to one another. And ensure that you're assessing what you mean to assess. Meaning, if you change your assignments, always remember to go back and look at what was I really trying to get out of this, and am I still going to get this out of my students? So now I'm happy to answer questions, which I think Lauren's going to take over.
Yes, hi everyone. Again, for those of you who maybe weren't here at the top of the session, my name is Lauren Lobdell and I lead the client services team at Tutor.com, so I'm going to help moderate some of the questions. If you want to ask Amy any questions, we do have a question box on your control panel, and we're going to be using that to field questions from the group. If you have specific questions for your school or questions about Tutor.com, we're going to ask you to just email us directly. That wasn't really the focus of the session today, was to talk about Tutor.com. We wanted to give you some helpful tips, Amy's resources that she's recommended, and some ideas to kind of play with here as you get into this. One main question that keeps getting asked is, will this session be recorded? We have been recording it. We'll clean up the recording, and anyone who registered, whether you were in this session or not, we are going to automatically email out to you. I'd add one more thing to Amy's checklist is be prepared for technology to not always work as well as you want it to. As we had this session today, there was some people who couldn't get into the meeting for some reason, even though there are over 100 of you in this session. Some people had sound issues, so just be prepared for that when you're working with your students. So let's go to some questions, and feel free to keep plugging those questions into the question box and we'll stay on the line and address them. But one question here was, Amy, you were talking at one point about backwards design. And if you could just really explain a little bit about that. Not everyone knows the pedagogy quite, since that's been your area of focus. So would you clarify that?
Sure. So backward design means you start at the end of the lesson. You start where you want your students to get. So you start with your assessments, your objectives and your assessments. You start there and then you work back, meaning that you think about all the little tools you want to use. You think about the activities and the assignments and how they lead you to that ending. So it's objectives technically is the beginning, but what it really is telling you to do is start from the end, start where you want your students to go, what you want your students to get, and then you work backward. And a lot of times that's, what do you want your students to get out of your whole class, the whole semester? You want them to walk out with what? So start there, and then you start building smaller chunks, and that's where kind of you might build units out. And then you have you start again at the end of that. What do I want my students to get out of this chunk? And now I'm going to go backwards. What do I need to do to get them there? And what do I want my students to get out of this chunk? Remembering at the end, I want my students to be able to do whatever that is. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's great. There was a couple questions about Padlet specifically, since that was a resource that you had gone over. Again, we're not endorsing any particular resources out there. There's so many great free resources, so many resources your school is investing in. So this is just one that was in your toolkit and has been successful for you. So I guess the questions were, do you know anything about first of all, you can go to Padlet.com if you want more information on that, and I'm sure that team can help you because we are not experts in that area. But it is free for individuals as far as you know?
Yes.
Okay. Next question.
And I don't think there's a limit. Like, sometimes it's free and you can do 5 Padlets and then it costs something. I don't think that's the case with Padlet. I've used it a lot and I've never had to pay anything, but I can't guarantee that.
And then there's a couple questions here about the PowerPoint. So we do have as a handout, and you should be able to access that on your control panel, the handout, a copy of the slide deck so that you have some reference here. It will also be something we can put out as a follow-up from this webinar along with the recording that you'll all be getting for your participation. Okay, let's see. There's a couple current clients of ours that are asking questions about meeting spaces. So I'm going to answer a couple of them really quickly here, and then we can always do some follow-up with you directly, or you can write to us here at clientsupport@tutor.com. So for those of you who are clients of Tutor.com, we did offer our meeting spaces platform as a collaborative academic support tool for clients that maybe didn't have one or needed something that had academic workspaces in it. So there's definitely opportunities to bring your instruction into meeting spaces. If you're an instructor, it is a place for your students who could do some group study. We also have some schools that are using it to get some of their tutors and even maybe some of their librarians online. Again, some schools have other video conferencing out there that they're already using, but we do have some clients that are using meeting spaces for these different use cases, and we'd be happy to help workshop with you. Okay, Amy, another question. Do you know if students can upload videos in the discussions in Canvas? And again, we're not Canvas representatives either, but just as a person who used it.
Yeah, I used Canvas at Arizona State, and I have never had a student upload a video in the discussion forum. That doesn't mean it's not possible. I've only had them do it, of course, in an assignment. So I don't know. I don't know. I can try to find that answer.
Yeah, we can follow up. We have all your questions logged, so we can follow up if there's something we don't know. Or obviously, you could ask Canvas or whoever runs your LMS instance at your campus. Let's see. So here's a question. Does the timeline teaching online differ from the classroom? Meaning, should you expect to be able to cover the same material in about the same time period?
Yes, you should. It should work that way, but you know, that's not necessarily true all the time, because as we know, a lot of online courses are like 7 weeks long. So it depends. I think what you should try to do, because of the situation that we're in right now, and these aren't traditionally online courses, is try to take what you would do in a week in your class and translate that into what you would do in a week in the online class. I would try to do that, but it doesn't translate like that outside of this situation always. So I mean, I guess the answer is not necessarily and maybe, but that's not the perfect answer.
So the answer is do your best.
Do your best, you know, yeah. There might be a week where you're like, I've covered everything, and so for this week, I'm just gonna play around with some fun stuff, and I'm gonna let my students do this and that. I mean, and that's okay. Like I said, you know, I think that the point right now is to get your students through your course and not to worry too much about the rigor. I mean, we always worry about rigor in higher ed, and really in any education. Oh, it's got to be rigorous. I got to make sure the students are doing this, this, and this, and they learn this much. And I don't think that you have to worry so much about that right now. But if you were to eventually move your course to online forever, then maybe you'd go back and say, okay, I'm going to take this stuff out that's not as rigorous.
Okay, what else? We got a lot of questions coming in, so we're going to try to get through as many while not going too much over on our time here today, just because we know everybody's busy. So here's a question about how can we keep students from being overwhelmed by the different apps that all their different professors are going to use? It's a great question.
That's a really good question.
Well, I think if I can just contribute one thought that comes to mind, this is why, again, we're not endorsing any particular tools out there. And as Amy was suggesting, kind of do this in small bites. So, you know, try one thing, don't try all the things. But again, a lot of your schools have access to a lot of great tools already that we don't even know what those things are, right? So if your school is investing in your learning management system, it has a lot of capabilities already to really build out your course pages. It may just not have been super relevant to you in the past to use that page that much, but you have a lot of tools at your disposal already that you can work with that might help with some of that consistency. Amy, anything come
I agree.
to mind from your experience?
The only other thing I would say is maybe just talk to your students and ask them, what are your other instructors using? What did you like? You know, if you're going to do a synchronous video discussion, why not just ask them? What have you tried so far? What's working? What's not working? And then maybe that's a good jumping off point. Try some stuff that they like. I wouldn't be afraid to do that. Have just honest conversations with them.
Let's see what else we got here. It sounds like maybe a couple people are having trouble with the handout that we have here. So if you can't get the handout, again, we're going to put out by tomorrow, you'll get a copy of the recording, and then we can also follow up with the slide deck and maybe some other resources as appropriate too. So you'll get at least the recording by tomorrow, and we'll get a copy of the deck out to anyone who's interested. One other question is, where do we get the certification? So tomorrow, when you get the email from me, Lauren, it will come with the recording embedded in it. So you'll have a link to watch the recording, and it also will have a certificate attached. So it's a PDF just saying you came to our session. Oh, and a couple people actually commented here, Amy, for our reference, that you can upload videos in your Canvas discussions. So
awesome.
A couple people confirmed. So.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's fun.
Any particular subject matter videos on YouTube that you recommend, or any particular software for subject matter videos that any come to mind? We can put that into an FAQ and maybe source from our team, who are academic experts in a variety of topics.
Mm-hmm. We could. We have a whole group of academic experts.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably the best way to do that.
One question is, what's the best tool in your opinion for an instructor who needs to receive videos from students containing their public speaking pieces, or I guess whatever assignment you're giving them to do a presentation? Any recommended tool from your experience?
So can you ask the question one more time? I just want to make sure I understand what it's asking.
What's the best tool for an instructor to receive videos from students, whether they're doing public speaking or doing a presentation? Like you mentioned that your students, at one point you asked them to do a presentation. What were some of the best ways you got that material back from them in video?
So, okay. Yeah, so I mean, they submitted their videos through the LMS, so it was an assignment, and they can submit a video. And Canvas used to be kind of weird. I've used Canvas, and Blackboard is what we used to use over at ASU. And they used to have trouble with videos when you would submit them. Sometimes you couldn't open them, and you had to open them in a different window and all that. And it's gotten a lot better. But what I will say is actually the types of videos that they submit, like the format of videos that they submit. I mean, I would say your LMS is going to be able to accept it. I would do that rather than an email, because the files are going to be too big. But I found that that I like to leave it open and let them choose what they want to make their video out of, if that's what they're asking, or if they're asking how they submit it. It's through the LMS would be the best.
Okay.
If you don't have an LMS, like I said, an email could be tricky because they might be too big.
Okay, a couple of people, it seems like, didn't know what LMS meant, so I'm just going to clarify that. That's Learning Management System, which is the tool that many campuses use to run their courses in an online environment, and other things as well. But examples are Blackboard, Canvas, Brightspace, Moodle, other, there's many
Google
other LMSs.
Classroom, Edmodo, yeah. If you don't know what yours is, then it's possible your school doesn't have one, in which case that's where I was saying there's a lot of free ones. You can just get one and literally in 2 minutes start building a course. I mean, there's a learning curve, there definitely is, but they're not that hard to use, and those are the best ways for students to submit stuff to you. It's the easiest way. I mean, your backup plan would certainly be to have your students email stuff to you, and that works fine too. But I think for videos, it would be better to have something a little more robust.
Okay, I think we got through a lot of these. Let me just go back and check. So it looks like there's one instructor here who is saying that her course, and this might be relevant to others, so that's why I'm going to ask this, is typically a 5-hour class that they do one day a week, right? In sort of the traditional mode. Do you have any recommendation for how you would take that kind of setting that you normally have a 5-hour, sit here and listen and let's workshop, and break that up across each day? Or would you break it up across, the same day of the week, kind of keep it consistent? Any feedback on how you might take that kind of course?
I would take that course and I would, of course, make that a week. So I would, whatever day of the week you want to start, Monday through Sunday, perhaps. And I would have several different things that they have to do throughout the week. And I would have things due like 2 different days. So have, one small thing has to be due on Wednesday and another thing is due on Sunday. I mean, and obviously if you have the flexibility to choose the days, then choose the days that you wanted them to be due, right? I actually hate it when my students submit things on Sunday nights. I don't have any control over it. I hate it because that means Monday morning, when I'm also trying to work my full-time job, I have to jump online and make sure my students don't have questions, and I try to grade things really quick early in the morning, and it's kind of nuts. So I wouldn't choose to do Sunday night if it were me, but I would have your students do small things throughout the week and break it up. So if it were me, the most perfect class, if you have a 5-hour class you're trying to break up, is I would have like students do some kind of work. They have to just read and watch content or something like that, Monday through Wednesday. Maybe Wednesday and Thursday maybe you've got a couple of synchronous sessions set up, video conferencing, where you're meeting with your students. And then maybe they have to do another assignment, and that assignment is due maybe Friday night, and then that's it. And then you start again on Monday. So I would try to break it up, again, just trying to have multiple touch points with your students right now, just because they're probably not the most adept online learners yet either. So I would say that would be ideal if you've got the time.
Okay, Amy, it looks like we got through most of the questions here, and we are at the top of the hour. So just any last sort of words of wisdom for everyone?
Just back to trial and error, be easy on yourself, be easy on your students, and be honest, and just let them know that you're doing the best you can, and let that be an open door. Let them come to you and ask questions at any time, and extend a little grace and take your time. Small bits it's like one day at a time. Right now we're kind of living in, just build your class 1-2 days at a time, a week at a time. Take your time there and give yourself a break.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Amy. This was so helpful. I know I learned a lot because I don't spend my time thinking about how to instruct online in the same way. So it looks like from the questions and the comments we're getting that a lot of people benefited from this. Again, if you have other questions that we can help with, whether you're a Tutor.com client or not, we are very happy to help out during this kind of anxious time that we're all living through. So we wish you all the best and have a wonderful rest of your week. We're almost there.
Yep.